You're finally going to be happy in heaven. No more pain. No more bad thoughts and worries. You'll be free. It's okay to be scared, and that's normal. I mean, I would be concerned if you weren't scared. You have to face your fears for what you want. Hang yourself, jump off a building, stab yourself, I don't know. There's lots of ways. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Alright, welcome to a short stories episode, your midweek Extraordinary Stories podcast. So, quick shout outs. Hello to Rich Kelbrick. Hey Rich, how are you? Thanks for getting in touch. Rosalinda Mendez. Fingers crossed I have said it correctly. Marsman61 on iTunes. Thank you for your lovely review. It was very nice of you. Not so much thank you to Tom on iTunes, who gave me 2 stars and basically hates Shouty Man at the beginning. I guess he was like, I tried it and that noise at the beginning is just horrible. I mean, Shouty Man is becoming his own entity. It's bloody ridiculous. He's becoming... He needs his own Facebook group, this man. Oh, this is insane. Okay, so I'll not babble on. I'll get to the story. I saw this story going round, and you may very well have as well, because it's current. It's been a really big story recently. Something I've always been interested in is the idea of distance and responsibility. And I've always wanted to answer the question, is it possible to be convicted for a crime if you weren't there when it happened? It sounds confusing, and yes, it can be, and this one is a little bit, but I'll take us all through it. Okay, are you ready for the story of Michelle and Conrad? Okay, let's go. Michelle Carter. You might have seen images of her crying in a courtroom in Massachusetts. Well, how did it come to be that she's there? Michelle was born in a place called Plainville, Massachusetts, and she was dating boyfriend Conrad. In 2014, Michelle was 17 and Conrad 18. The event which this whole case rests on happened in 2014. Now, Michelle and Conrad, they had dated for 2 years, so they had met in 2012. I think they met in Florida. Now, they were both from Massachusetts, but they lived 35 miles apart. So a lot of their relationship, it happened through phone calls and text messages. Conrad and Michelle, they would make videos for each other and send them to each other. They largely spoke through text message and phone call. I mean, not a conventional relationship, but nevertheless, they kept this up happily for a couple of years. Unfortunately, Conrad was suffering from mental health issues. Now, he was open about it, and he often talked to Michelle about it, and she knew about his moods every day. Have bouts of depression and be prone to feeling anxious for long periods of time. Now, despite that, Conrad was actually doing quite well at school, and when days were a bit brighter for him, he would take part in the track team, the rowing team, and actually he was doing really well in his studies. He would, even though he was suffering from fairly crippling mental health issues, he would eventually graduate high school with really good grades and at the offer of a place at university to study business. So a little bit about Michelle. She attended high school and she was popular in her school. However, Michelle had also been receiving therapy throughout her life for mental health problems. Sometimes what gets described are psychotic episodes. And so, in a way, actually, the ability to be able to talk to each other about their feelings wasn't a bad thing for the couple. In 2014, Conrad's increasing depression was looming over him. He was having a really difficult period, and he reached out to Michelle. And it's the act of reaching out to Michelle that would be the reason that she would end up sitting in a courtroom crying. It comes down to the text conversations that they had. So I'm going to read you some of these text conversations. For clarity, I'll use he when I'm talking about Conrad and she when I'm talking about Michelle. They will always be he and she. So Conrad reaches out to tell Michelle he's in a bad place and he's thinking of taking his life. She says, but the mental hospital would help you. I know you don't think it would, but I'm telling you, if you give them a chance, they can save your life. He says, it doesn't help. Trust me. She says, so what are you going to do then? Keep being all talk and no action? And every day go through saying how badly you want to kill yourself? Or are you going to try and get better? He says, I can't get better. I've already made my decision. From here, the next conversation develops to Conrad telling Michelle that he is seriously now considering harming himself. She says, how do you want to harm yourself? He replies, something I don't know yet. She says, please don't. He says, I hate myself. I'll always hate myself. I'm never going to view myself as good. I am so far behind. She says, what's harming yourself going to do? Nothing. It will just make it worse. He says, make the pain go away, like you said. And she ends this conversation by saying, it will make the pain go away temporarily, but when you're done, you'll just regret it and feel even worse. So, in both of these exchanges, it's argued that she's actually trying to help him. I don't know what you think about that. I read and reread and went over those conversations a couple of times. And yeah, her words are quite harsh. I do think she's trying to push him towards a mental health facility. I almost feel like there's a slight undertone of like she's exasperated with it, and what she's doing is she's trying to like really force him to think. But that said, this is only a few days later, and something in the conversation changes here. He says, if you were in my position, honestly, what would you do? She replies, I would get help. That's just me though. When I have a serious problem like that, my first instinct is to get help because I know I can't do it on my own. Later that day, he reaches out to her and he asks, what is the best way to produce carbon monoxide? She says, well, there's more than one way to make it. Why don't you Google ways to make it? He replies, OMG. She says, what? And he says, a portable generator. That's it. Okay. Now we get into the words that can only harm her in this case. She says, so are you sure you don't want to kill yourself tonight? He says, what do you mean, am I sure? She says, like, are you definitely not going to do it? He says, I don't know yet, but I'll let you know. She says, because I'll stay up with you if you want to do it tonight. He says, another day wouldn't hurt. Her reply, you can't keep pushing it off though. That's all you keep doing. Then she writes to him, you better not be bullshitting me and saying you're going to do this and then purposely get caught. The next exchange, he says to her, I'm overthinking it. She says, I thought you wanted to do this. The time is right and you are ready. You just need to do it. You can't keep living this way. You just need to do it and not think about it. Just do it, babe. You can't keep doing this every day. He says, I do want to, but like, I'm freaking out for my family, I guess. She says, Conrad, I told you I'll take care of them. Everyone will take care of them to make sure they won't be alone and people will help them get through. We talked about this. They will be okay and accept it. People who commit suicide don't think this much. They just do it. Okay, and the final one I'm going to read you is why Michelle is so vilified in this situation. She says, you just need to do it, Conrad, or I'm going to get you help. You cannot keep doing this every day. He says, okay, I'm going to do it today. She says, do you promise? He replies, I promise, babe. I have to. She says, like right now? He says, where would I go? She says, you can't break a promise. Just go to a quiet parking lot or something. Shortly after this conversation, Conrad goes to the parking lot of a Kmart not far from his home, sits in his car and lets it fill with carbon monoxide. The following morning, he's found dead. When his phone is searched, the text conversations between him and Michelle are discovered and she's arrested. She's questioned before finally being charged with involuntary manslaughter. And now the storm begins. Once those messages are public, people want Michelle Carter's blood. They believe her to be the driving force behind the suicide, the reason that he did this. Michelle's defence team will argue that she was pushing Conrad not towards suicide, but that she was trying to force him to see that he needed medical help. That almost what she was trying to do was get him so far to the edge that he would then go, shit, I need help here. I need to speak to someone because I am really close to killing myself. That's the defence. The prosecution say different. They say she knew exactly what she was doing. And a 17-year-old knows that the suicide of her boyfriend would bring her sympathy and attention. And there's a slightly complicated part of the law here where, because Michelle was 17 at the time of the text messages, but older when she's being tried, it kind of muddies things a little, which is very much what her team tried to do. And they tried to not have her tried as an adult. And so, she's tried as a juvenile, and she's sentenced to 15 months in prison and 5 years probation, as well as access to regular therapy. The judge sums up the proceedings by saying, I have no doubt in this case her actions led to his death and that her complicity did not falter. And so ends the story of Conrad and Michelle. It's a messy one. I mean, there's nothing nice, there's nothing redeemable in this story. I guess I just get taken by this idea of death from a distance. And I think why this case is so big, and it really blew up this case, I mean, it really absolutely dominated headlines. The reason it's so big is because we are in that age of having relationships with people through social media, through phones, through the internet. And it's opening up this world of communication where there needs to be laws in place to police this kind of thing. I mean, tragically, this is not the first case like this, and I just don't think it'll be the last. But I really hope that we can go somewhere where it kind of, people's eyes are open to the fact that just because you're not standing next to someone with a knife or a poison or a gun, it doesn't mean that you're not responsible for their death. Okay. Well, I know that's been a little bit heavy. But sometimes that's just what it is. Alright, that's it from me on this Short Stories episode. You know where to find me. If you want to get me on Facebook, you can. There's a Facebook group. a wonderful place. If you want to get me on Twitter, it's at extraordinary... No, it's not. If you want to get me on Twitter, it's at Extra Stories Pod. And if you want to get me on Instagram, Extraordinary Stories Podcast, of course, you can reach out to me by email, extraordinarystoriespodcast@gmail.com. Keep sending me your stories. They are wonderful. I love hearing them. I'm also on Patreon, should you want to support the podcast. All right. Until the weekend. Okay. Goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.